The floor is now open for general discussion. Hopefully we can get all those 24 people online and talk about issues that they see are important. Especially I would like to know about gaps in the work that you've seen, the low-hanging fruit for what we could leverage to get more researchers involved in this area. I think that's our essential goal, to get more people involved to solve these very difficult problems.
I'd like to raise one question, maybe to seed some discussion here, which is this question of training versus evaluation data, and particularly annotated data. That has been a major concern and a design driver on the DIVA program, at least for Kitwer's role on it and the implications downstream. But the large majority of the annotations that have been created are sequestered for the evaluation, for testing, and they're not available for training. And we still have, I think, 22 or 23 hours publicly released data, and there are tens or hundreds of thousands of annotations on a lot of that data that could be used for training. But I'm wondering, amongst the performers and people who've used this NEVA data on the call, how much is the training data is the data that's there now sufficient for training? And as CMU showed results where they trained only on the NEVA data, I was happy to see that. Is it sufficient for training in the sense that it's comparable to other existing data sets, or is it particularly impoverished in terms of the amount of training data? And do we need to remedy that in order to make it, call it qualified to be sort of an academically consistent data set? Robbie, do you know how many hours of the public data set we released annotations for?
We've released 22 hours of annotations, and I think it's 328 hours of ground camera data, which would include, of which that 22 hours is a subset. And I think it's on the order of, I can look it up, that it's on the order of 10,000 annotations in that 22 hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 10% of the public data is annotated right now.
Have people been able to leverage the unannotated video? You're in this speech world, people will do semi-supervised adaptation with unannotated data. I think I haven't seen of all of those techniques in the video space, but it would be good to know how much additional annotations would be needed. It might be, I'm wrestling internally in my head of whether or not we should release some of those sequestered data for testing and training, and whether that would be useful to the community.
So one of the things to consider is that the participants themselves have annotated a good portion of the data. It's different than the T&E team, but a certain portion of that has been released publicly on the Git site, and there is more forthcoming from there. There are also considerations right now for additional public annotations from the T&E team. There are discussions that are ongoing, but we'll see where that takes us. But regarding Anthony's question of what the participants see as the level of data that they need, and is there sufficient data currently in the data set, either from the released annotations, the annotations from the participants, or what is necessary. It would be really nice to hear from the participants what they feel.
Perhaps I can start a bit from the IBM side. So overall, I would say there is enough data. So we don't see like a big gap. I mean, obviously there's always like a big gap compared to like kinetics, but in overall, it's kind of like sufficient. If there would be more relabeling, then it might be in terms of like how to get the best out of it in the most reasonable time, to look specifically for rare classes, because as it's real world, it's still very imbalanced. So if I would have to label more data, I would definitely focus on stuff where there are like less than 100 or 200 samples per class, and not on the ones where we have already like 4,000 samples.
That makes a lot of sense.
But in terms of data overall, I mean, it's real world. So every real world data set is imbalanced. And in this case, it might make sense to look a bit more specific for stuff that's where we have very few samples, but overall there's enough data. And then something else that we saw when we were moving from known facilities to unknown facilities, at the moment, it's only 20 cameras. So if there would be more labeling, I would not label the same cameras again. I would rather vote for like having more different viewpoints. That might also help to make it more generalizable. Perhaps just as two ideas, what might make sense.
Yeah, that condition certainly exists, but it's in the sequester data. So that when there's decisions made towards the end of the program about releasing data, there'll be a lot more variety in the data set that'll be publicly available, hopefully.
Yeah, and I can imagine when this is going to happen that more people might pick it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then usually everything that makes it easy for people to adapt, like pre-computed clips on bounding boxes, so people don't have to read the JSON files just to run action classifier, stuff like that is always like usually very well appreciated, especially when you have like students who just want to run something fast and easy.
So we could use the ground truth annotations to do that and sample other areas just off of tracks with no activities. And so, but basically pre-compute a trimmed classification only data set.
Yeah, because I mean, at the moment, it's like a lot of overhead that comes with the detection part and the spatial temporal localization. But in terms of like most activity in the community is on the action classification of pre-trimmed clips.
Yeah, that's why.
Usually when everything is done right, then having better action classification accuracy also helps for the rest.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
Could we, there's always a trade-off between super complex and super easy. The easier it is, you get, the more people you get to take part, and the harder it is, the fewer people take part. I think Diva is probably over at this other part. I'm concerned that ASAP will be over at that part as well, because it's so many different technologies and signals that you have to deal with. So I would really like to try to facilitate making a simple abstract of the Diva task into something more tractable for the graduate students. Okay, any other comments? It's hard to get discussion going online. It's so challenging.
So I have a question, especially for the CMU team. When you guys are working on this problem, what is the most block point, the challenge part in terms of developing your systems?
It's a good question. So we meet several problems. So first one is the efficiency. It's kind of like we spend half of our time to make the system much faster on both training and the inference time. So we can iteratively optimize our system. And on the research part, I think we are able to try a lot of different models and different training strategies and find the best one. So I think one problem we met is maybe we need more information in the future to evaluate our system. So for now, we only have that like PAODC or PMINS and like activity-wise scores, but you say our system is a two-stage system. One is depends on the detection model. It's like, can we find the person or vehicle or not? I mean, we actually visualize some of the videos if the objects are too far away. I mean, it's really small or it's on the edge of the camera. There might be some shape change. Our detection model will fail to find that object. But for now, we didn't have any metric to know that. So can we find the object? So for the second part, that's if we find this object, then we can do action classification. Then we can use the current metric. So I think in the future, for us to make a better system, we may need more information on this, analyze the performance.
Yeah, I have one comment here. Maybe we can format that as a activity proposal generation challenge or something like that, where you just evaluate those activity type agnostic spatial temporal localizations. Maybe you can just reusing the existing metrics, but just don't use the classification results. And that we can evaluate the first stage performance of our systems. So we find out whether the problems come from the first stage or the second stage. That will speed up our development.
Yes, so it's like for now we are moving on to the unknown facilities. We don't know anything, any information about this new facilities. All we know is we have a similar class and some camera parameters. But if we can do some detailed analysis, we may know a right direction to go.
Yeah, and I have an extra comment about the action recognition model. It's like in current official dataset CAF1, we only have like 33 action examples for training. And so if we can add some like more examples for the actions like steal, person steal something, or person abandon packages for things like that, or the long tail problem is too serious in current dataset.
I like the idea of evaluating just the proposal stage. It seems like that could be done by a straightforward way by doing activity classification where there's no type designation. It's activity versus not, basically just pure activity detection problem. And then, as you said, you could, I like your analysis there, the CMU work on finding an upper bound, doing that. I thought it was effective. But it seems like it wouldn't be hard to tweak the evaluation to do that, speaking for people who don't do the evaluation.
Perhaps one other bit more high-level point would be, and I know I was raising this before, the point of the evaluation metric itself, because it's at the moment a bit out there compared to standard evaluation metrics for action localization, like on tumors or ActivityNet. And this also makes it a bit hard to, once for students to publish on that, because usually the metrics are a bit disconnected. So when you have good numbers on tumors, it doesn't mean that you have good numbers on SDL and vice versa.
Yeah, Hildy, yeah. Thank you for your comments. Yeah. That's really good comments. Actually, we are working on the metrics, and you will see the metrics on the leaderboard. I hope it's within months.
Nice. Looking forward to that.
Yes.
Yeah, I saw your mean average precision in your talk, and I thought, oh, she's gonna ask.
Another question for performers in general, not just DIVA performers, but right now the DIVA data set and the ASAPS data set, or at least the video part of the ASAPS data set, are completely disjoint. They were collected at the same facility. At least a lot of the DIVA data was collected there, and all the ASAPS data was collected there at Muscatatuck. But and so there's a lot of similarities. There were different parts of the facility, but the question for you is what could the government program teams, maybe across these two programs or on one or the other, what could they do to encourage people who've worked on the MIVA data to participate in the ASAPS challenge? Is there something about that could make it easier or more attractive for you guys to participate in ASAPS, given this alignment of the data sets?
I mean, one way might be this. So at some point of this DIVA project, maybe we can release the known facilities. I mean, I know it's so it's better like you harden the data set and you evaluate on the SDL machines, but now we're moving on to unknown facilities, and that's our major task. So a good point to release this known facility with annotations is all the teams can do the analyze by themselves. It's like, for example, if IBM want to use some like MAP or some other metric, or us, we want to like evaluate the trackers or detectors, we can do it by ourselves. So that's one suggestion.
John, I thought we released the vector for the FPL and TPL, the DM file I'm talking about in our database.
We have, I was going to say actually, just to back up a little bit, Young, just to tell everyone that we're planning to release more useful diagnostics on the website where you can drill down, compare systems at a much deeper level than just the table on the website. So I think that will get at some of the questions. To answer you, Young, I think we did still keep in there the deck curve. So you could calculate mean average precision from that deck curve directly. It's a little bit weird because it's time-based offline, but I think we did include the rate-based offline as well. So it would be a pretty easy lift to do that.
I'd like to just jump in real quick on Anthony's question. I would very much like to encourage synergies between the programs, especially as Anthony said, there's some significant similarities in the video part of the data. And we're open to chatting, about how we might improve the synergies. I think we're also very open to contestants contributing annotations to the ASAP's training data. So I think there's a lot of potential there for us harmonizing and maybe even helping to improve both programs based on the synergy.
Can I ask one question? So was synthetic video data created for the ASAP program, John?
There's no synthetic video data. The synthetic data is non-video.
Non-video, okay.
ASAPs does not include spatial bounding box annotations. So it has temporal delineation of what are called evidences. So it's framed a little bit differently, but in the end, there's a fair amount, moderate overlap between those evidences to be detected in the video on ASAPs and some of the DIVA events, the DIVA activities. But ASAPs doesn't provide any data that could be directly used by DIVA systems as training because those bounding boxes are not there. The temporal bounds are there, but these are the same type of surveillance video frames. The evidence of on the label is potentially a very, very small fraction of the image. So ASAP's performers cannot count on having directly usable training data that would plug into a DIVA style system.
I guess I'd ask the participants, while we have this forum, would they find data without bounding boxes, but that has been temporarily annotated by stream useful? Or do they absolutely require bounding boxes?
I guess it depends a bit on how, let's say, how large the action would be in the video. So when it's like a center focused action, then obviously no one needs bounding boxes. If it's something that's happened somewhere in a corner of X, Y, then it might be helpful.
It's the former case, right? So that it's fixed camera surveillance. So where things happen is anywhere in the frame, and typically it's very small.
It really depends. So I've looked at a lot of the data now. Some of it's foreground, some of it's background. So it's intended to be variable.
Yeah. But none of it is subject focused, right? It's not as if the video is centered on a particular activity because somebody was actively filming that thing. Yep. That's never the case with surveillance, and we tried to make it realistic. So something might happen in the foreground, but it might be over here and this big, and then it's over here and this big, and then it's this tiny over, it just varies a lot, as you would expect. So it's certainly plausible that in some cases it's enough. It really is close to the foreground, and it's 20% of the pixels might be on the subjects in some activity, but that'd probably be pretty rare.
Okay, we're already 15 minutes over on our schedule, so I think we should stop. Thank you for actually having a discussion today. I appreciate that.